Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Brand Your Practice podcast, where you get to learn about branding and marketing and scaling your private practice. I'm Brent Stutzman, your host, and today we're talking about 4 mistakes to avoid when choosing an electronic health record, or EHR, for your counseling practice. This is sort of like a cautionary tale because choosing the right EHR for your counseling practice is important. Your electronic health record software will become the hub for your private practice, from scheduling to billing to insurance claim submissions, to client records, note-taking, and the list goes on. Well, to help me talk about this is Hillary Wolfe. She is the founder of LaPlata Family Therapy in Durango, Colorado. Welcome to the show, Hillary.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So we're going to talk about your journey to finding the right EHR for your practice and the mistakes our listeners should avoid. But first, share with the listeners a little bit about your private practice in Durango, how it got started, and the catalysts for your EHR journey that you went on.
Yeah, so I started LaPlata Family Therapy here in Durango because I wanted to have a practice that was very collaborative with other therapists. When I worked for a community mental health agency, and when I made the transition into doing my own private practice, the thing that was the kind of scariest for me was the idea of doing therapy alone. And so I really wanted to create a environment with other therapists where we could collaborate and not feel like we were in this on our own. And so that was the biggest push for getting LaPlata Family Therapy started, as well as just wanting to provide really high quality care in a rural community.
Yeah, well, great. Thank you. Yeah, Durango's this beautiful town. I would call it, it's not a beautiful, sleepy little town because it seems like there's a lot of people moving there. It's booming, and it's becoming not as rural as I would imagine it used to be, because the downtown is like this historic, quaint little place, and then you just kind of move outside, and then you got your Home Depot, and you got your Walmart, and you got all these kind of, the amenities of not a small town anymore.
Yes. And that also, yes, so we do have a lot of things like that, but our nearest city is still 3.5 hours away. So, when it comes to getting like health resources and that sort of thing, we're still very much disconnected.
Yes. Well, let's jump into the 4 mistakes to avoid when choosing an electronic health record for your counseling practice. So take it away, Hillary.
The first mistake, so I'll just start by saying I went on a long saga of trying to find the perfect electronic medical record, and this was spurred by me bringing on a psychiatric nurse practitioner and an occupational therapist to be a part of the practice. And so previously the practice had just been with behavioral health therapists. And so I thought that we needed to switch to a medical record that was going to be more comprehensive. So my first mistake was overly trusting sales associates. And this, what I mean is I got talked into a product that I was sold would be perfect and was very customizable to what I need, that was going to take a lot of work off of my plate. But then once I got into the nitty-gritties of it, it actually was much more work than what I had already been doing. And it really was meant for medical professionals, not for behavioral health professionals. And there was just a lot of pieces to it that I didn't take the time to really dig into to figure out how it was going to work logistically. The sales associate, they wanted to sell me on it because they make a profit. And I don't think they really understood my needs.
Sure. Yeah, because what you were doing is bridging because you were bringing on these other disciplines. You needed something that was outside of just behavioral health, because you wanted to have this from our conversation, you wanted an all-in-one solution that could do like the billing and the insurance claim submission, not just for behavioral health, but also psychiatry, which is a whole nother ball game.
Yeah, and OT, and then also that had the notes. And I thought that this software, or what I was sold on, was that they could do that. And that I was also sold on that they would take, they would do the scheduling for us. They would do the billing for us, and all these different things. But then once I got down into it, it was going to be hours and hours, like hundreds of hours. Not just like 20, like hundreds of hours of setup work. And so it was actually really designed. This specific one that I'm referring to is really designed, it seems like, for hospitals and much bigger organizations that had a large administrative team. It wasn't designed for a small private practice. So, yeah, that I think is the biggest
Got
thing.
it. Yeah, wow.
And so... And then moving into the next mistake of moving too quick. I was really in a rush to get things set up because I wanted, things to be as efficient. And as I was adding on people, I wanted them to be able to start in with one product and not have to move. But that was a mistake because I didn't take the time to vet the systems to make sure it was going to work before we fully committed. And so what happened is I ended up in a point where I was going to go with one and found very quickly that it was not a right fit. And then I ended up having to scramble to switch to another one. And I actually ended up going through 4 electronic medical records before going back to the one that I had originally started with. And this created just so much headache. Yeah, it was awful. And so, what I would really recommend is, if you are planning on getting into a medical record, start slow and be patient and really, get into it and do, a trial where you're actually using it with your system to see if it really will work and to problem solve on the issues that will come up to see if you can make it work for your company instead of, kind of switching everything at once.
Yeah. You're a unique practice where you're trying to bridge all these things together. I'm curious, after going through this, what would a trial look like? Would you say, let's just try it out for a month? Because it's a lot to kind of set up and do go into these EHRs. So what would your thoughts be on that?
Yeah, so I think 2 different ways. There, 2 of the systems that I tried out had something called a sandbox site. So essentially, it was more or less a live, version of the software that you can get in and use. And so, going in and actually putting in a couple of your own dummy clients, and then, for a few weeks, actually putting in notes and running the system how you would need to would be one option. Or, do start using the system, maybe minus the billing, because that's the part where, that really does take a lot of work to set up the clearinghouses and that sort of thing. But you could use it, create the claims or whatever and just download them that way and put them through a different system or mail them in. But really, getting in and really understanding the workflow and that sort of things, because a lot of the systems, just the workflow alone was very confusing and was really overwhelming to kind of navigate and figure out, especially for our specific professions. Was there anything else you wanted to mention about that before I move on to the next one?
I think, I love the idea of the sandbox. That's a creative thing that a software provider or an EHR can provide to play around. I mean, you could only probably do so much of playing around in a sandbox like that. And a sandbox is really just a technical term for software developers to really just allow you to play and get used to it, to a typical software. So I bet there's only so much you can do with it, but I think that actually sounds like mature softwares will have something like that. And so that actually goes to what I was going to say, I think maybe later on, or is in a blog post I was talking about, is like, how do you know? One of the ways you choose the right software to use is if it's well funded, right? If they actually have well resourced, because you don't want you don't want to choose a software and it goes belly up and you lose everything, right? So one way that you can kind of see that a software company is well funded, or at least thoughtful, is that they have a sandbox for you to actually try it out. And so I think that's great. So go ahead and take us on to the next mistake to avoid.
Yeah, and actually, one last thing with the one before was if you can find a company that's already using the software. I think that was my number one regret, was not reaching out more to other practices that I know that were utilizing that software to ask them what they thought. Because one in particular, now I know that quite a few people that have used it and have not had the best experience. And so had I taken the time to reach out and do a little bit more on the ground, research and that sort of thing, I would have avoided going with them in the first place. Or would have understood better that it wasn't really designed for my needs and my type of practice. So, if you can find that, I think that is the biggest, because they're going to give you the truth. So, okay. And then the next one is not verifying cost. So what I found with a number of the electronic health records is that they have these base prices, but I did not realize then to add on all the features that I wanted or was used to using, that each feature cost an additional amount. So for example, like one of the softwares that I tried out, the base cost was only like $58, which sounds really great. And then each additional provider was only, like $20 more. Mm-hmm. But then what I found out is then adding on televideo for each provider was an additional fee. Adding on billing for each provider was an additional fee. Adding on a client portal was an additional fee. And then all of a sudden, the cost was almost $1,000 a month, where I was anticipating paying like $300. And so that was really disappointing to find out, because, it just, wow. It seemed kind of misleading. And then I didn't do a good job of asking the question of like, what is my all-in cost? And so I was caught off guard. And then, also being mindful with not verifying cost is some of the softwares that I looked into have like a percentage-based fee structure. And so they want to take like 8% of your total profit. And so really being, think through like, is that reasonable? Does that make sense for your practice? Or would it be better to just do a straight across fee with what you have going on? Because, if you're in the beginning stages and you're going to be, growing exponentially, 8% right now might not sound like a lot, but down the road that could end up being, a lot more than you need to spend to get what you need.
Got it. Well, thank you. Yeah, well, before we go on, I want to remind the listener about a free resource you can take advantage of today. Look, most mental health professionals open a private practice to help more people and to make more money. Well, the problem is they often lack a clear marketing strategy. And that's why I created the Private Practice Marketing Roadmap. It's a free training video series that will walk you through my 3 pillars of private practice marketing. If you need fresh ideas about marketing yourself as a clinician or your private practice, or you just need a marketing strategy, go to brandyourpractice.com/roadmap. It's completely free, and it'll help you generate that pipeline of new clients that you want. You won't grow unless you have a plan. So go to brandyourpractice.com/roadmap and sign up today for the free course. All right, Hillary, this has been really helpful. So why don't you lead us into the 4th mistake to avoid when choosing an electronic health record for your private practice?
Yeah. So the 4th one that I would say is know what the most important features are for your practice. So what I found with going through these different softwares is some were really good at the billing, but they, didn't have the best interface for the actual therapist to be able to collect notes. Or I found that some of the practices were really good at having a client portal that had lots of features and bells and whistles, but not every practice needs that. And then a big one was with doing the psychiatry. Not every medical record is set up to do e-prescribing, so electronic prescriptions to send to, to send to pharmacies and that sort of thing. And so really knowing what is, the most important. And so for me, it was the workflow for my therapist, having it be really straightforward for them to be able to get into the system, and complete their notes as quickly as possible. And then the second one was billing, having it be really seamless and smooth with billing, because with having the multiple professions or disciplines, our billing is a little bit more complicated than some organizations and we do take insurance. So when I say billing, I mean sending claims and that sort of thing out to insurance companies. And so, taking the time to dive into those features to understand them, I think is really helpful.
Well, I'm curious now that you're on the other side of this. So you had to, it sounds like you probably had to compromise, because you hinted that you went back to the one that you used to have in the beginning. So you came back home, and I'm curious, yes. So how are you working it out? Because I imagine the one you're using now isn't the end all and be all. So what have you had to sacrifice as a result of going back? You kind of had to pick your poison, right? So I'm curious, what were those sacrifices that you made and that you're trying to figure out a way to work around?
Yeah, well, the biggest reason why I left or went on this search was the product that we're using now and we're using before we went through this EMR saga was they didn't have e-prescribing. And so with the psychiatrist coming on, that was something that we needed. At the time, I didn't know that you could just get a standalone system to kind of supplement. I was trying to have everything be all-inclusive because I thought that would be the most seamless, and I thought that there was going to be one product that could do everything for us. And I think the other softwares that I did look into, I think, yes, they could have done the things that we needed to do, but it would have not been as efficient and just more complicated to use. So we ended up going back to what we had because they seem to have the best, they're a system that is constantly changing and adding features, like changing in a good way. And their interface was really easy for our providers to use. And we were able to get the e-prescribing feature that we needed on a secondary site. And hopefully the company that we're using will, be adding in the e-prescribing feature as time goes on.
Well, Hillary, you've really set up the listener you opened up a story loop in that you're like, well, now we wonder what this EHR you're using. So I would love for you, what EHR are you now using? You went back home after this journey. So what are you using now? Because I'm a big fan of it too.
Yeah. So the EHR that we're using now is called Simple Practice, and I absolutely love this software. And honestly, having gone through all these other ones, they really are just a really wonderful, simple to use software. Which somebody that, I consider myself relatively tech savvy, but I'm definitely not an expert at, electronic medical records and all this stuff. And it's, really easy for me to do what I need to do, including the billing, which I've been doing out of it for the last 3 years. And so I think that is a high thing to achieve for an electronic medical record, is making insurance billing possible for the layman's person that doesn't have specialty billing training. So
yes, well, thank you for sharing your your journey, Hillary. And how can people get in touch with you or find more about your practice, LaPlata Family Therapy?
Yeah, so they can visit us at www.laplatafamily.com. So that's LAPLATA family.com. Or they can give us a call at 970-769-0131.
Great. All right, folks, thanks for listening. If you found the conversation useful, subscribe to the podcast, and please join me again next time for the Brand Your Practice podcast.